Welcome to Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about the intersection of faith and pop culture and how culturally relevant topics can help us start conversations about our faith. I'm joined today with Dr. Nick Tavani. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, and you have kind of a long resume. So you are an RTB visiting scholar, RTB Washington, D.C. chapter president. You have a PhD in biophysics and physiology, and you're also a family practice doctor.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're going to be
Thanks.
talking about something kind of fun. So you recently watched Oculus 5.
Yes.
Right? You watched a clip from there?
It popped up on Facebook, and I grabbed my attention because I'm not a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched what they were saying, and it grabbed my attention. I realized what they were saying is not just about games, but this is about something for our future that may change the culture.
Right. So they were talking about augmented reality.
Well, we'll start virtual
reality.
Yeah, with the goggles.
Right. So we're familiar with that.
I only had one experience with virtual reality a while ago where you got in this ride and you were a jet pilot. And I said, oh, it's probably just a ride. When I got those on and it started going, I was a jet pilot.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're just, it's hard to not believe you're there. That's how well they were doing it years ago. Now it's even more, I understand, more realistic living in this virtual realm.
Yeah. So we have virtual reality, and we see that in things like Ready Player One and in
Right.
tons of films, but it's also something that is accessible today.
Well, yeah, that's what they were talking about, the latest things that are coming out.
Right.
And I'm not advertising for them, but it's just what I happen to see. But yeah, Ready Player One, I hadn't heard of that movie until I began to talk about this with a patient of mine who never talks. And as soon as I mentioned virtual reality, he starts going on and on about how he has people over his house and they have this virtual reality game they all play together and they all love it.
Yeah.
And it opened my eyes to an entire subculture out there that's growing very big of gamers, of people actually playing in virtual reality. Now I know, people are on their cell phones and on their computers a lot, but this goes beyond that.
Right.
And then I realized that I needed to understand really what effect is this going to have. How does this affect our entire culture?
Right.
Because something grabbed my attention in the speech that was being given in the Oculus video. They want to have 1 billion people on this platform within the next, I don't know, a year or two after it comes out.
And this is the virtual reality?
This is virtual reality. Yeah, and then there was a speaker, his name was Boz, he was the second speaker. And you can go on YouTube and find it to see his whole speech. But what got my attention was that he's saying, well, we've been in virtual reality, and then there's augmented reality. He says, but our real goal is mixed reality.
Yeah, so tell us about
Yes,
that.
he goes, this goes beyond gaming. And then he got serious. He said, this is going to be a cultural game changer. He says, if you think that cell phones changed us, and believe me, they have.
did, yeah.
Flying over here, I looked in the airplane, everyone on the plane was on their cell phone. But he said, this is all about connectivity. And with mixed reality, have you heard of it?
Oh,
before?
yeah. So we were
Okay.
talking a little bit about
Yeah,
that too.
that's where virtual reality and reality come together so that I could be in Washington, D.C., in my home, you could be right here, and this whole environment would be created with the realism that we have right now. And the idea is to connect people without having them to physically come together. He said that's going to take over business, even to where, we could use that real estate for buildings for some other purpose because businesses will use this. Schools, people coming together without actually physically coming together. Does that impress you in some way?
It's impressive. It's kind of hard to wrap my mind around that.
Right.
But it seems
Well,
like
it wraps around your mind.
Right, that's true. It seems very much like something we'd see in Black Mirror or like you talked about Ready Player One, where we're just fully immersed in this altered world. And so I have to ask, as a Christian, how can we begin to even understand that?
That's good, and I think we should be thinking of it in positive terms as a Christian, because usually we're always the ones to beginning to think what's the bad part of that.
Right.
people to this. A lot of Christians, they don't like Facebook, and they say we run our cell phones too much and all that. But there's a positive side to that too. So we need to start thinking of how this technology can enhance our ability to spread the gospel and also live Christian lives. And so I'm just beginning to think about that. This is really early on, but already I know in the newest versions they're coming out with is that they have 6 degrees of freedom, so, or 6 degrees, I think they're called, of freedom, so that you can have reality in all dimensions like this. And eventually they'll get to where you can touch and feel and all of that as well. So it's going to be very much there. But what I realized as I was watching the games is that the imaginative part went towards things that were not enhancing people's spiritual lives. It goes, there's the violence and there's the self-centeredness and there's the immorality, all that. It's just stuff that makes for good games. I think we're going to have to come up and show that there's a better way in the way we behave. And also, here's the important thing. We need to show that spiritual reality is real and different than fantasy.
Right.
That's going to be the big challenge for a generation who grows up in a virtual realm or a mixed reality realm where they can't tell the difference. We're going to have to somehow be able to tell them that there is a spiritual reality. And what's interesting is sometimes the fantasy world taps into that. I realized that ancient Rome was the same way with their gods and myths and all. People lived in another world. And Christianity came into that context and made a difference by proclaiming the truth of the gospel. And I think we're going to have to think of ways how to do that.
Right.
I think that's a challenge for your generation to do that.
It's a really interesting idea. So I love what you're saying is that, think of some positives and how we can positively engage in this new technology or emerging technology, but then how we can bring truth to something
that's right.
is imaginary. So we bring the truth of our faith and the truth of the gospel. Thank you so much. If you'd like to hear more from Dr. Nick Tavani, visit reasons.org and search Nick Tavani.